Welcome to The Cow Behind the Barn, a podcast exploring humanity, the world, and the divine as experienced and interpreted by an artist. I'm Kevin Caldwell, a co-founder of the Table Collective. This is the very first episode. It's really a prequel to the whole podcast, and I've called it Butterfly Effect. But I want to start by saying something really obvious. Human beings exist. And then let me add a few comments to that. Human beings have almost universally exhibited astonishing creativity. Human beings have almost universally reported having spiritual experiences. And human beings have almost universally developed ways to share their creativity and spirituality with others. In those simple observations describe the soil from which the artistic and the religious dimensions of being human have sprouted and grown. I've come to see religions as a particular form of artistic expression, in which human creativity and spirituality combine. And I would say the same is true looked at the other way, that the arts are a form of expression of the spiritual essence of human beings, just as much as religions are. Now, let me add right away 2 comments about that opening statement. First, I haven't always thought this way about the sources of spirituality and creativity. By the way, if you are curious about who this I is, about me, there's 2 places where you can get more of my bio and some of my background. One is the website of the Table Collective, a nonprofit that I'm part of, and you can get that at tablecollective.art. And then there's also a book of mine, which is titled, just like this podcast, The Cow Behind the Barn. And just search for Kevin Caldwell and that book title, and I'm sure you'll find it. All right, my second comment. Nothing I said in those opening comments is anything like as simple as I made it sound. Just take the statement, human beings exist, or even just take the word exist, and then go and ask Buddha or Muhammad or William Blake or the poet Tagore or the list can go on, and ask them what it means to say someone or something exists, and you will get a wide variety of answers. This episode, as I said, is a prequel to the whole project, and my whole project is packed in to that opening statement in many ways about humans and creativity and spirituality and art and religion and what it means to be human. I'm 66 as I'm recording this, and these are some of the big things I've been curious about for a long time and have been exploring and thought about deeply for a long time. And that's why I described the podcast saying, I explore art, religion, the universe, the mystery of the divine, and what it means to become more fully alive as human beings. Creativity is an expression of spirituality and vice versa. So again, I've been exploring the idea that religion might be a particular form of art, a way that human beings have collaborated, you might say, over time in different places to be able to share spiritual experiences together through spoken word and poetic wisdom and music and visual art and shared action or ritual. In so doing, they have imagined different ways of seeing who we are, the world we live in, the nature of the divine or its absence, and what it means to be fully alive and fully human. Now, I've observed, and I'm sure you have too, that people tend to have a few ways of processing and thinking about the variety of worldviews that religious founders have come up with, and artists too, for that matter. Some would see that none of it is true. Some conclude there must be just one true religious path. Some assume that they're all just different ways and each of equal value. I've been sensing for a long time that maybe there's a different way. I've been searching for years for a way to explore out loud, explore in public, if you will, what that different way might be. That connection of art and religion, creativity and spirituality. And to do so by actually creating something that was itself a mixture of those. A different genre for talking about and experiencing religion and art, spirituality and creativity. If religion is an art form, then the great founders might be like spiritual creatives, and the great time-tested texts might be like groundbreaking expressions of spiritual creativity. The spiritual insights and creativity these have captured and offer us have changed the way human beings pursued the art of being human. I guess to explore all this in public, it seemed to make sense to use my own art and express spiritual things through it, which makes it sound like I've sort of planned all this out. The truth is, I don't really know exactly what I'm going to be making, and I'm really not sure who it's for, in the sense that I'm not sure if anyone will be listening on the other end. And I don't have a clear plan for how I'm going to design it all and organize it. Let me comment just a bit on those three admissions. First, I don't know what I'm making because I'm not sure that this is really a podcast. I thought I wanted to write, drawing on several decades of digging into ancient languages and texts like the Bible and Quran, and then later the Gita and Buddha's teaching, and later still the Tao Te Ching and the Granth and others. I've got an academic background that prepares me for that, and years of living in other cultures. In 2013, I started writing that book. I really tried. Now it's 2024 and there's no book because the book just didn't cooperate. It didn't seem to want to come out. Eventually, I began to realize something else was brewing. I've come to see that the best way to explore all this is to share it like an artist might. My art happens to be words and music, poetry, song, poetry in songs. A book can't really offer that. I wanted a form that would be more like a living audio mural, if you will, a long poetic narrative interspersed with song and music and insights from religious texts, which, as I've said, are also works of art in their own right. And so the podcast form just seems to offer a genre with the most possibilities for weaving it all together. Although, again, I'm not really sure that this podcast is really a podcast, the way that others you may have experienced are. The second admission, I'm not sure anyone will ever listen to this. I'm being sincere here. From this side of the mic, I'm not sure there will ever be a you listening on the other side. Finally, the last admission, I'm not at all sure how I'm going to do all of this. So I'm curious to find out what will happen, which is part of what approaching this as a creative work is all about as well. I've started over and over. In my head and in my imagination, I've tried to map out a plan and arrange things in some sort of order, but I don't see much beyond maybe the next 2 or 3 episodes. And even those, I assume, are going to change dramatically when I actually get down to recording them. So, if I don't know what I'm making, why make it? And if I'm not sure who, if anyone, is listening, why keep talking? And if I don't know how I will map out whatever it is I'm doing, then why keep doing it? An answer that addresses that first question about if I don't know what I'm making, why make it, is that I can answer in the way that I think most artists would answer. Artists almost always begin to create without a full idea of what it will be at the end. The creative process is, well, a process, and the thing being created is in many ways a participant and can only reveal itself to us as we work on it and shape it and listen and mold and sketch and erase and restart. So I'm going to treat the podcast as if it were my art studio, you might say, and every episode like a new canvas or a sketch pad. And since I'm not a visual artist, my brushes are spoken words with music, songs, poetry. The paints I use are all mixed from my experiences of life and other cultures and mistakes and discoveries and my studies of religion and religious texts and from my music and songs and lyrics and poems. Episode by episode, I expect to discover more about what I'm making as I make it. Like I said, I'm curious about what's going to be next. Now, that second question, if no one is listening, why keep talking? I suppose I keep at this because I'm convinced that what we do matters. It makes a difference whether anybody knows about it or not. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, I'm not sure what sound it makes, but it does fall, and I think that matters because I believe in butterfly effects. The early theoretical work involving what we call the butterfly effect was undertaken originally by mathematicians and physicists who focused on demonstrating that very small events and actions could have significant impact initially on weather patterns. That's what they were studying. Their studies contribute to what's known as chaos theory. In 1950, mathematician and computer scientist Alan Turing noted the displacement of a single electron by a billionth of a centimeter at one moment might make the difference between a man being killed by an avalanche or surviving that a year later or escaping. Later, mathematician and meteorologist Edward Norton Lawrence described the scientific nature of this using originally the metaphorical example of the details of a tornado being caused or influenced at least by the wings of a seagull. By the year 1972, he'd been convinced and persuaded to switch that metaphor from a seagull to a butterfly, maybe to make it a little more poetic. However, early on, as the idea was being explored in the world of science, this notion that a tiny butterfly or a tiny object could have monumental effects had already been explored in the world of the arts. Ray Bradbury, in his 1952 short story A Sound of Thunder, narrated the way that the death of a butterfly could directly affect historical events. And similarly, the way that the movement of the wing of maybe a tiny insect or tiny creature could result in massive impact shows up in 1962 in a children's book, The Phantom Toll Booth by Norton Juster. In that book, one of the characters says, "Whatever we do affects everything and everyone else, if even in the tiniest way. Why, when a housefly flaps his wings, a breeze goes around the world." So we see scientists and artists, each in different ways, trying to describe the same reality. And I think it's fascinating that scientists, in order to try to explain what the science was telling them, were struggling to find metaphors. In other words, they were trying to communicate like artists. As an aside, that's actually akin to my effort here. I want to communicate like an artist about things that sometimes only get expressed from the left side of the brain, with reason and logic. I'm going to put some of my cards on the table at this point. I won't demonstrate here why I believe this, but I believe the butterfly effect is true both physically, as illustrated in these prior comments from mathematicians and physicists, but also psychically. If everything is interconnected in such a way that a tiny wing can affect everything else, then might the tiniest wish or thought have an effect? And if so, then each person's inner journey matters to the universe. Not just actions, but intentions, thoughts, wishes. Each person's cultivation of, for example, their false self, of estrangement and pride and half-truth and outright hatred, adds to the winds of devastation and destructive force that grows and drives the waves that become the psychic tsunamis that wreak havoc upon humanity and the world. But then conversely, and on a more positive note, each person's journey of progressive cultivation of their true, fully alive self might set loose a breeze that, no matter how tiny it may begin, will swell into waves that grow into psychic tsunamis that bring life in all of its fullness to humanity, even to the world. To put it another way, I'm convinced that the cultivation of our spiritual and creative and relational human essence can enable us to be more alive, and more aware, and more awake as human beings, and thus become, if I can say this, better humans. And better humans will mean better humanity, and a better humanity will mean a lot for every other animal, plant, species, and type of thing we can imagine. In some ways, this podcast is a result, I suppose, of my intention to move the wings of my words in the hope that even such tiny actions as a thought or a word can be a source of good. And that's the answer to my question about why I keep trying to do this, even if I think no one might be listening right now, in this very moment, as I record my voice saying these words, even if there will never be a you someday listening as you drive or walk or work out. I'm flapping my wings as an act of faith, an act of hope, that somehow, somewhere, sometime, someone will feel a breeze that is light and balmy and warm, like the movement of soft sun on skin, the sound of rain on leaves, fresh air, life, hope. At this point, I want to express all of that in a different way, not just with words, but through music, in my song, Butterfly Wing. They say that all it takes
the wing of just one butterfly to change the course of time in a broken life, a million miles away, million miles away, million miles away. Miles away. They say that all it takes is just one gentle whispered word, and though it not be heard, can still do its work. A million miles away, a million miles away, a million miles away, million miles away. Shadows fall around like acid rain, soak into our souls and leave bitter stains, pouring out from inside hearts long shattered. Can my tiny soul do anything that could matter? From a million miles away, a million miles away, a million miles away, a million miles away. They say that all it takes is the wing of just one butterfly to change the course of time in a broken life. They say that all it takes is just one gentle whispered word, though it not be heard, it can still do its work. A million miles away, a million miles away, a million miles away, miles away, million miles away, million miles away, million miles away. They say that all it takes is the wing of just one butterfly
Tiny wings and whispered words that can have their effect a million miles away. I believe in that. By the way, should you want to listen to the song again and not have to relocate it within the podcast, you can find my music on any streaming platform. Just look for me, Kevin Caldwell. Now, what about that third question? Why keep doing this if I don't know exactly how? If I don't know exactly what the plan is? I suppose it's because experience tells me that I will discover what I'm doing if I start doing it, even if I do so before I fully know what it is. There was a book entitled We Make the Road by Walking, which records a week-long dialogue between Miles Horton and Paulo Freire, two of the most prominent thinkers on social change in the 20th century. In that book, they discuss together the nature of social change and empowerment. And here I want to give a shout out to my good friend in the UK, Phil Simpson, for continuing to use that phrase as a way of encouraging me and so many others over the years. Thank you, Phil. But for me, just that title provides the inspiration that I may not know what I'm doing until I get done, and then turn around and look back at where I've come from, and so discover the path I was on. The way forward, then, is to just start. Yesterday, I was crawling around on the floor helping my 2-year-old granddaughter look for something. We looked under couches and bookshelves and tables and chairs, and we never found what we were looking for. We did find a lot of other things we didn't know were there to begin with when we began our search. It's amazing to me what we find when we don't find what we thought we were looking for. So, just because we don't know exactly what we're doing or exactly where we're going doesn't mean we shouldn't begin. And I trust that beginning, without knowing where I'm going, doesn't mean I won't arrive at the place I was intended to reach, even if I discover that I didn't intend it. Because again, it's amazing what we find when we don't find what we thought we were looking for. Through creating this podcast, I'm eager to find things I didn't know I was looking for, things I haven't thought about as I'm starting. And I realize I may not find what I thought I was setting out to discover or create. This may not turn into the thing I'm imagining right now. But, of course, even the first step of our feet has to be taken in some direction. You can't steer a parked car. You've got to do something in some direction, even if the road we end up making isn't the one we expected. So let me try to describe what I think I'm crawling around on the floor to find. The map I do have, such as it is, includes, as you have already surmised, religion and spirituality and art and creativity and humanity and what it means to be fully alive and aware and awake, and how we might experience more of that. And on the journey, these will all be stirred together and mixed. They will interact and swirl together, tangled and inseparable. Since I'm trying to create a different way, an artistic way to express all this, each episode is also going to draw from all of the paints I have in my studio. And though I paint, of course, with words and sounds, there will be insights from texts of various religious heritages and life experiences and the world of art, and it'll all get packaged in and around my own creative work of poetry and music and song. But I suppose my deepest hope is that every episode will blend those things together and also invite us into ways of experiencing them, experiencing creativity and spirituality and connection and more of life. I hope I'll experience that. I hope you will. As I said, I don't have it all mapped out. In fact, I don't plan to have completed creating a next episode while I'm in the midst of recording the episode that will precede it. That means I don't know what's going to come next exactly. In other words, I expect to be barely a step ahead of you. I'm coming to the end of this first episode, and it occurs to me that I haven't said anything about the title, Cow Behind the Barn, and maybe I should do that at this point. My grandmother took up painting at an advanced age, and her first attempt was a painting she called The Cow Behind the Barn. It was a typical beginner's effort in many ways, though I think her use of color was striking. But the main feature of the painting is that while there is a barn, there's no cow, because, as is obvious from the title, the cow is behind the barn. Something that's such a vital part of the whole picture is actually not visible. It remains hidden, mysterious, but it's there, or at least the title tells us it is. And I take that as a metaphor, in a way, for the mystery of what life is about and what it means to be human, the mystery of creative inspiration that's so prevalent among us as humans. And for me, I take it as a metaphor of the divine mystery. I hope that this journey, as uncertain as I am about it and about what it's going to be and how it will take shape, might help us to cultivate a way of seeing ourselves and the world, and a way of being ourselves in that world. In fact, I hope it's going to be a way of healing ourselves and the world, of becoming more alive and more aware and more fully awake. Now, as I begin to bring this episode to a close, I want to do that with a poem that functions in a way like an intention for this whole project. It's my poem that I've called Eyes Open, And it's from a book of poems and lyrics and essays that I mentioned before, titled The Cow Behind the Barn. As a poem, it really is about, as I said, an intention to be more aware, more awake, to have open eyes on purpose. Because to find the cow behind the barn means having our eyes open. And sometimes that requires that we consciously determine to keep them open. It's a statement of my intention to crawl on the floor and find things with my eyes open. So I offer the poem as a kind of meditation, an invitation to see in new ways and to pay attention on purpose.
Eyes open. My eyes open. Close, open, close. A million moments, moments upon moments. Eyes open. Eyes close. A million blinking moments, blind and absent, gone. Eyes open. Eyes close. A world goes by, unseen, untouched, unlived. Eyes open. Eyes close. Eyes open. Eyes open. Unblinking, burning, begging to close. Eyes open. Drying, moistening, watering, running over. Eyes open. Awake. Seeing. Alive. Eyes open. Open in the moment, somewhere between gone and not yet come. The moment that is simply, fully, merely here. Eyes open.
I said I hope these episodes will include something experiential, so I want to try something as we close. I invite you to find some time, maybe later if you can't do this now, get settled and just breathe. Imagine there's a warmth and a light in your very center, like an energy of life and compassion. In a moment, I'll invite us to pause and whisper a gentle word, a word of aspiration and hope, and invite us to aim it at a situation or at someone or something or someplace in need of our tiny souls doing one tiny thing that, in fact, might matter in a very non-tiny, transformational way, whether anyone ever knows we did it and whether or not we ever know about the outcome. So if you're in a situation where you can pause the podcast and do all of that at this time, wonderful. Or consider doing so later. I'm going to pause for a moment now and give you time to hit pause as well in case you want to do that at this time. Well, I'm going to send us off with an aspiration here. May we, I and you, if there is a you out there hearing this, open our eyes, hold them open, truly see. And as we become fully alive, fully aware, and fully awake, may we move the wings of our hearts, and in doing so, add to the waves that can heal ourselves and each other, and yes, even the universe. Okay, so what's coming next? In keeping with what I said earlier, I haven't completed the script for the next episode yet, although I'm getting close. But I have a sense that it's going to be about beginnings. My beginnings, your beginnings, the beginnings that shape us as people and form the soil from which our lives grow and take shape. And those ancient texts I keep mentioning have a lot to say about that. And those spiritual creatives, the religious founders I've mentioned, experienced a lot in their own lives, and I'm sure a few of them are going to show up as well, and their beginnings. But so will the text that is written in the tissue of my own heart, which I trust will inspire fresh light for you and the things written on the pages of your heart as well. Beginnings, souls, who you are, who I am, who we are, why it matters, it's all part of the quest for that cow behind the barn and where it might be found. More next time.